There is a version of you that has never made a mistake. You know the one. He wakes early. She finishes what she starts. He never wastes an hour. Never says the wrong thing at dinner. Never lets the manuscript sit unfinished in a drawer. This version of you does not exist. And yet, you have built a small room for them anyway. Somewhere behind your ribs. And you visit it more often than you visit your own reflection. Feel that room for a moment. It has good light. The desk is clear. There is no clutter. No half-read books stacked by the bed. No unanswered messages glowing on a screen. In that room, you are already who you were meant to become. And every time you step out of it, back into your actual kitchen, your actual body, your actual, unfinished life, something in your chest tightens. A small closing. A breath held too long. Call it the curse of potential. Not a curse in the old sense. Not a hex laid by an enemy. A quieter one. The kind you lay on yourself. Gently. With love, even. The way a parent might say you could be anything. And mean it as a gift. But a seed planted in every direction at once grows into nothing. It stays a seed. Forever. Almost a tree. There is a strange comfort in staying almost. In staying possible. Because the possible self can never fail. She has never been rejected. He has never been told no. The moment you take one real step, write the page, make the call, walk into the room, the infinite versions of you collapse into one. One flawed, particular, breathing person. And some part of you would rather keep all the versions alive than lose most of them to become one true thing. Think of a house with 100 doors, all closed, and behind each one, a different life you might have lived. As long as they stay closed, you are the person who could have been a painter, a sailor, a parent of 4, a monk, a stranger in another country entirely. The moment you open one door and walk through it, 99 others quietly seal shut behind you. This is not failure. This is simply what it means to live in time, instead of above it. But no one warns you about the grief of the closing doors. They tell you to follow your passion, find your purpose, become your best self. And none of it prepares you for the particular ache of realizing that becoming anything means unbecoming almost everything else. So, some of us stop walking. We stand in the hallway, hand on a doorknob, always, never turning it. Is this what it means to be haunted? Not by the past, but by a future that keeps rearranging itself just out of reach. What if the most exhausting ghost a person carries is not a memory, but a possibility? Notice how differently we grieve these two kinds of ghosts. A memory, however painful, has an edge to it. It happened. It is finished. And there is a strange mercy in that finality. You can set it down, even if you never fully forgive it. But a possibility has no edge at all. It keeps reshaping itself around whatever room you put it in, taking the exact size and weight your fear needs it to take. That day. Some mornings it is small. A private ache you can carry through breakfast without much trouble. Other mornings it is enormous, and you feel it pressing against the inside of your ribs before you have even opened your eyes. And here, the image begins to shift shape. Not a house anymore. A garden, half planted, where you keep digging up the seedlings to check if the roots are growing right. Each time you lift one gently from the soil to inspect it, you set it back a little further from the light. You are not neglecting the garden. You are tending it so carefully that nothing in it ever gets the chance to actually grow. Let's sit with that a while longer. The old stories knew something about this. Or at least they circled it. The way firelight circles a cave wall, without ever fully touching the dark corners. Consider the sleeping king under the mountain, waiting for the hour when his country needs him most. Consider the sword in the stone, meant for one hand alone, resting untouched for 100 years. Consider the seed catalogs of old agrarian towns, where a single grain was called the promise of the field. Not the field itself, only its rumor. These are not claims about history. They are mirrors, polished by many hands, held up so a person might see their own shape in them. And the shape they show, again and again, is this: potential is sacred, right up until the moment it is asked to become specific. The sleeping king is glorious, as long as he sleeps. Wake him, and he is just a man, with a man's knees, a man's doubts, a man's mortality. The sword in the stone is destiny incarnate, until someone actually pulls it free. And then it is only a sword, and someone has to go use it. Get it dirty. Maybe break it. A myth left unfinished stays pure. A myth completed gets scuffed by the ground it's dragged across. Consider, too, the old habit of calling a young person a natural before they have done much of anything at all. The word sounds like praise, but listen closer, and it carries a quiet warning inside it, as if the gift were already complete, requiring nothing further, needing no dirt under its nails. The stories that survive the longest are rarely about the naturals. They are about the ones who fumbled the sword the first time, dropped it, picked it up again with bleeding palms, and only years later were called anything close to chosen. The myth remembers the falling almost as tenderly as the rising, even when we choose to forget that part. On our way home, here is where the image changes form, moving from the myth outside us to the mechanism inside us. Because this is not only an old story, it is a daily, private transaction, running quietly beneath ordinary decisions. Notice how the unfinished project feels safer than the finished one. The novel that lives only in your head cannot be rejected by a single editor. The business that exists only as a plan cannot fail in the marketplace. The apology you have rehearsed but not yet spoken cannot be met with silence. As long as a thing remains potential, it remains undefeated. This is not laziness. Let that be said plainly, because so much shame gets built on that one lazy word. What looks like avoidance is often a form of protection. The nervous system doing what it has always done, shielding the tender, still forming self from a blow it isn't sure it can survive. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned that being seen clearly was dangerous. Better to be seen as promising than to be seen as finished and imperfect. Promising keeps the door open. Finished closes it. One way or another. Feel where this lives in the body, because it always lives somewhere in the body. A tightness behind the sternum when you imagine submitting the work. A held breath before hitting send. A stomach that clenches, not at failure itself, but at the specific, undeniable shape failure would take once it were real. Once it had a date and a name, and could no longer be revised in private. The ideal self never has to breathe. She is a held breath. Permanently. The actual self has to inhale and exhale and be witness doing both. And here, the image turns inward one layer further, from mechanism to memory. Because for most of us, this did not begin as an abstract idea. It began somewhere specific. A report card. A parent's sigh. A teacher's aside to another teacher. Not meant to be overheard. About what she could really be if she just applied herself. Praise for potential. More praise than for effort or outcome. Teaches a child something quiet and permanent. That the imagined future self is more valuable than the present, breathing one. So the child, and later the adult wearing the child's old coat, starts living slightly ahead of their own body. Always rehearsing. Always almost present, but not quite arrived. Picture the private altar. Because most of us have built one. Even if we never called it that. On it sits the unwritten book. The unopened studio. The language never learned. The apology never given. The body never fully inhabited. Because it might not be the final version. We light a candle to that altar in small ways. A bookmark left at page 1 for years. A domain name bought and never used. A gym membership paid for a self that has not yet shown up to claim it. The altar is beautiful. It is also, quietly, a grave for the actual days that were spent tending it, instead of living. Notice the particular loneliness of comparison here. Because this may be the sharpest edge of the whole shape. We do not only compare ourselves to other people. We compare ourselves to our own unlived potential. And that comparison never has an opponent who can lose. The imagined self is undefeated. Because she was never asked to actually run the race. Standing next to her, the real you. Tired. Imperfect. Still learning. Will always look smaller. This is the curse doing its quiet work. Making you a stranger in your own life. Forever measuring your footsteps against a shadow that casts none of its own. And there is a second, quieter grief hiding underneath this one. Because the ideal self does not only judge you. In some strange way. She keeps you company. She has been with you since childhood. Through every failed attempt and abandoned plan. Always waiting patiently in the next room. To finally close the distance between you and her. To actually become someone specific. Someone finished in this attempt, if not in all future ones. Means losing that companion too. No wonder some part of you holds on. Not out of cowardice. Out of loyalty. To an old, familiar kind of hope. And yet. And here the image softens. The way tension in a shoulder finally softens after long-held stillness. Every tradition that speaks of potential also, somewhere in its older layers, speaks of harvest. Not because the harvest is superior to the seed, but because a seed that is never planted was never really a promise. It was only a shape held very still. Admired. Never tested against soil, weather, or time. The invitation here is not to abandon the dream of who you might become. It is to notice when that dream has quietly become a place to hide, instead of a place to grow from. Perhaps the ideal self was never meant to be lived. Perhaps she was only ever meant to be a compass, pointing, from a small and steady distance, toward a direction worth walking in. Never meant to be arrived at. Never meant to replace the walking itself. What might it feel like? To let the compass simply be a compass. What follows are not instructions. No secret handed down. No proven method. Only a handful of small, human things a person can try. Alone. In whatever quiet is available to them. The first is simple, and can be done tonight. Sit somewhere ordinary. A chair, a floor, the edge of a bed. And ask yourself plainly, what does my ideal self actually cost me? Not what they promise. What they cost. Let the answer come slowly. Maybe it costs you today. Maybe it costs you the pleasure of an unremarkable Tuesday. Spent worrying you are not yet living it right. Sit with whatever surfaces, without rushing to fix it. The second is a practice of the hands, not only the mind. Choose one small, real, finishable thing. A single email, a single drawer, a single paragraph. and finish it completely today. Not the biggest dream, the smallest true thing. Notice, afterward, the particular texture of done. How different it feels from the smooth, endless texture of someday. Let your body learn that difference. Because the body remembers what the mind forgets. The third is quieter still. Write a short letter. Never mind if it is only a few lines. To the version of yourself who has already achieved what you imagine wanting. Then write back, as that self, and ask them one honest question. Was it worth what it cost? Let the answer be unexpected. Let it be smaller, or stranger, or more ordinary than you assumed. The fourth is a practice of the eyes and ears, done anywhere. As you move through an ordinary hour, notice each time your mind drifts toward the unfinished version of your life. The language not learned, the trip not taken. Simply name it, silently. There is the altar again. No judgment required. Only recognition. Naming a pattern is often the first loosening of its grip. The fifth asks for stillness. Perhaps 10 slow minutes, no more. Place a hand over your chest. Feel the actual weight and warmth of your actual body. The one doing the imperfect, particular work of being alive right now. And ask, what would it feel like to be finished? Exactly as I am. For just this one breath? Not forever. Just this breath. Let the held place in your chest soften. Even slightly. Even briefly. The sixth is social, if you're willing. Tell one trusted person about something unfinished you've been protecting. The manuscript, the plan, the apology. Let them see it before it is polished. Notice what happens in your body when the door opens even a little. When the private altar is witnessed by another pair of eyes. And the world does not end. The seventh, and perhaps the hardest, is a small ritual of letting go. Choose one door in your imagined house of 100 doors. One version of your life you know you will never live. And consciously, gently, close it. Not with violence. With something closer to gratitude. Thank the imagined self who lived behind that door for keeping you company for as long as they did. Then let the hallway grow one door quieter. And notice how much lighter a hallway feels with fewer doors demanding to be chosen. If you find yourself wanting to do all 7 at once, resist that too. The curse of potential loves nothing more than a person trying to fix themselves completely. Immediately. All in a single evening. Choose one. Let it be small enough to actually finish. Let the smallness itself be the practice. None of these practices promise transformation on any particular day. They are simply ways of turning toward the room you have been avoiding. A little at a time. With as much patience as the avoiding took to build. Somewhere in all of this, it becomes possible to imagine a different kind of relationship with your own potential. Not a locked room you visit in shame or longing. But a horizon you walk toward. One unremarkable day after another. The ideal self does not have to be destroyed to be released. She simply has to stop being the only version of you allowed to matter. Nothing here is offered as certainty. These are not facts about the mind. Not laws of the self. Only one way of looking. A lens shaped by old stories and quiet observation. Nothing more binding than that. Take what is useful. Leave the rest exactly where you found it. Perhaps the truest thing that can be said is this. A life lived is smaller than a life imagined. And stranger. And more specific. And somehow, despite all of that, or maybe because of it, more yours. The garden untended stays full of promise and empty of fruit. The garden planted grows crooked. Imperfect. Eaten in places by things you didn't expect. And still, somehow, it feeds someone. There will be days the old room calls you back. Good light, clear desk, that flawless version waiting patiently behind your ribs. You do not have to burn the room down. You can simply visit less often. You can let it become a place you remember. Instead of a place you live. Maybe the ideal self was never the destination at all. Maybe she was only ever the one standing at the very first door, quietly asking you to open it. Not the last door. Not the only door. Only the first. And what waits on the other side was never meant to be perfect. Only, at long last, real.